Have you been wanting to go to therapy, but you just have no idea where to start or even how to pick the right therapist? I'm Jessica. I'm a licensed counselor and also the owner of a private practice, and I want to be your therapy bestie. So today we're going to talk about 5 things that I think you need to consider when looking for a therapist. Also, at the end, I'm going to talk about some warning signs to keep an eye out for so you don't get stuck with a therapist that you just don't connect with or is kind of weird or sus, and you waste all this time and money with them just to not get any results. So the first one is kind of boring. It's logistics. So you need to make sure that a therapy provider that you choose is convenient to either work or home. You don't want to be commuting long distance to see your therapist because you're just going to get burnt out by that. It's not sustainable. You might go a few times and then you're just going to feel like, I don't want to drive all the way over there, and you're going to quit. And we don't want that. Most therapists right now do offer virtual sessions. I personally prefer in person, but virtual sessions are a lot of times less awkward than you think they would be. So that's an option too if a therapist is kind of far away. The second logistical thing is you need to make sure that this therapist is able to meet with you at times and days that are convenient for you, and also at a frequency at which you need them to. So you don't want a therapist that's like, sure, I can meet with you for the intake tomorrow, but then after that, it's going to be 8 weeks before I can see you again. At the beginning of therapy, we're meeting pretty frequently because we need to get the ball rolling. So if they're not able to schedule with you at a good frequency, you need to move on. The second thing to consider is cost. So again, this is logistical, it seems obvious, but I think it's just important to note that investing in your mental health is the most important thing, but going broke for therapy is not going to do your mental health any favors. It's also important to note that the most expensive therapists are not always the best therapists. What I recommend is kind of going with somebody middle of the road. So looking around at different prices in your area and just going with the price that you can afford. That doesn't seem super overpriced, but doesn't seem maybe too cheap either, because that might indicate that they don't have a ton of experience. So yeah, going kind of middle of the road. Unless of course you need to go with the least expensive option just because financially, like it's better to be in therapy with somebody who's maybe newer in the field than it is to not go to therapy at all. Also, if your insurance plan has mental health services, please go with a provider that's in network. You don't want to waste a bunch of time, you don't want to waste a bunch of money meeting with a therapist when you don't have to, because if mental health services are included on your insurance plan, you're going to be paying a lot less. So the way you would figure that out if mental health services are available to you through your insurance provider is just giving your insurance provider a call and asking them. The third thing to consider is experience. So this kind of means a few things for me. The first one is obviously you want to make sure that they're experienced in that they're credentialed and licensed. This is going to be a different license in each state. So I can't tell you like, oh, it would be this license. Like for me, where I practice, I'm an LPC. That could be the same in your state or country. I don't know what it is in other countries, honestly. But in the United States, we kind of have different names for it depending on what state you're in. So just Google it and you'd be able to figure it out. The other thing is experience in what you're coming to therapy for. So you're not going to want to go to a therapist that specializes in couples counseling when you're coming for anxiety. The way to figure out what they specialize in is just to look at their website. Their specialties should be listed on there, or when you're scheduling the intake, ask them or the receptionist or whomever is scheduling with you, and they should be able to tell you. The fourth thing to consider is that you feel comfortable with them. So on that initial phone call or initial meeting, you should feel comfortable. You should not feel like you're getting weird vibes or maybe your personalities just don't match to each other. You should not feel like you need to hold back with them. Of course, it's going to take you maybe a few sessions to warm up if you're somebody who like really struggles to kind of pour your heart out or wear your heart on your sleeve. Like it might take you a bit to warm up. But you shouldn't feel like, oh, I'm going to be judged by them. If you feel that way, maybe bringing it up to them, because it could be something that comes up in your everyday life, or it could be like some vibes that you're catching from the therapist. The fifth and final thing to consider is that therapy should continue to feel beneficial. So I don't want you to get in the mindset of like, once you pick a therapist, you're stuck with them. You can go looking for a different therapist at any point that you want. Sometimes it happens where, you're working with a therapist for a long time and then you kind of feel like you've just accomplish what you can accomplish with that therapist. So it's time to take a break from therapy altogether, or it's time to go look for a new therapist with a different approach to work on maybe some other goals. But just know you can go choose a different therapist anytime. You're not stuck with them. Okay, last, a bonus. So warning signs to look out for with therapists. Things that if you come across these, they might not be a good fit for you. The first one is that they are not transparent with costs. Your therapist or their receptionist should be telling you the cost for a session before you even walk in the door. If they don't tell you, ask. If you ask and they don't tell you, then that's a really big warning sign. Usually therapy is a flat rate for the intake session and then a flat rate for every session after that. So at my practice, we have the same rate for intakes and our 50-minute sessions. So that cost is the same. And I always tell that to our clients before they even meet with their therapist. Sometimes I forget and they're like, oh, what's the cost? And then I tell them, your therapist needs to be transparent with this. The second one is that you feel like maybe your values don't match to theirs. Sometimes it's hard to tell because therapists will sometimes not reveal much about themselves, which is fine if that's what they choose to do or not do. But if you feel like, oh, maybe there's just a block between us, or I'm not getting good vibes, or I'm feeling like they're judging me because maybe we just live two different lifestyles, or for whatever reason, if you just feel like it's not clicking, don't keep pushing at it. Give it a session or two if you want to, but then move on if it's still not clicking. The third warning sign is that they are unwilling to schedule a 15-minute phone call with you. So sometimes therapists will offer free initial consultation sessions. So these will be either in person or over the phone. At my practice, we're not able to do them in person just because we are so busy. And usually I am the one scheduling the intake session. And I'm pretty good. I've scheduled hundreds of intake sessions. So I'm pretty good at matching clients to which therapist would be the best fit for them. But if a client is like, oh, I really want to talk to them, just to make sure that, their personality matches before I spend this money on an intake, I always schedule that phone call for them. I don't hesitate to say okay, let me reach out to the therapist and figure out when would be a good time to schedule that phone call. The fourth warning sign is if your therapist gets defensive when you ask them about their treatment approach, which is sometimes called their modality, or if they get defensive about any questions about therapy or the therapeutic process. So if you're like, hey, what do you think about what I've told you so far? Where do you see therapy going? Which is a perfectly legitimate question. If your therapist gets defensive about that, that's definitely a warning sign. I would personally run. A therapist should be transparent with you about where your therapy is heading at any point that you ask. The fifth warning sign is one that other therapists might not agree, and that's totally fine. I respect that. But for me, if your therapist doesn't mention goals or ask you what your goals are within the first few sessions, that's going to be an issue, because for me, I need to know where we are headed as a therapist so that we're not going all over the place. So if a client comes to therapy to lessen their symptoms of anxiety, increase functioning in relationships, that's what we're going to be working on. Of course, they can bring other things that they want to talk about. But if we've had a couple sessions where I'm like, oh, I feel like we've lost our direction, I always have that treatment plan with our goals listed to refer back to get us back on track if I need to, or to ask the client, is there something else you need us to be or want us to be working on? And that also helps me as a clinician figure out what skills and strategies I'm going to introduce to them, because I know at the start of therapy, this is what they want to work on. So then I'm going to start my assessment and thinking about what skills match to their personality. But that's a whole other video, I feel like. So yeah, let me know if you want to know more about what therapists are thinking, or how we plan for sessions, I guess. All right, well, that is our time. I hope that this was helpful. My goal is just to kind of take away some of the mystery surrounding therapy, because the more information we have, the more empowered we are to take action steps. Let me know if you guys want me to film a video about how to find a therapist in your area. Obviously, this would be focused to the United States where I am, because I have no idea how to find therapists in other countries. But if you want a video on where to start, where to find therapists in your area, I can definitely film a video on that. And also feel free to leave any questions in the comments. I'll either answer them in the comments, or if they're a really good question that I feel like other people might be wondering about too, I'll film a video about it. All right, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.